that Trump will do anything further to harm Russia, run, after all, by his good friend, Vladimir Putin. I think that U.S. sanctions enforcement generally is not as effective as it should be. I think this is a long-running problem. I don't think the imposition, the monitoring, the enforcement of sanctions as a whole are done very well. So I don't doubt that there's additional economic pressure the U.S. and Europe, for that matter, could put on Putin, but I don't see Trump initiating it.
Now, joined now in the studio by, as promised, Ambassador John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to President Trump. Welcome to the studio.
Glad to be with you.
Thanks, and good to see you face to face. We usually talk from a long distance down the line. Can we just start with Ukraine and the reports that have been developing in the course of the day so far? There seems to be a Ukraine deal on mineral extraction on the table. It seems to be in a good place from the point of view of agreement. Still has to go through the Ukrainian parliament, which I guess is positive. That's better than having a shouting match about what it should look like and a deadlock. But it's not entirely clear at all what it might mean, if anything, for Ukrainian security and the provision of that security from the United States. Are you optimistic, Ambassador, at all?
Well, I don't think this deal will have much to do with the security of Ukraine. I think, as we've heard in reports, and that's all we haven't seen the text yet, that the idea that Ukraine would be required to pay for military assistance that has already been conveyed, mostly during the Biden administration, is out, which I think is fair. I also think it's fair to say to Ukraine, okay, so we've helped you a great deal for free. We're not backing away from that, but going forward, we hope you can pay for a little bit more of this. We did this in World War II. We've done it in every war we fought in. And so some kind of agreement on how that would happen makes sense. We'll see what this deal actually provides. But the point that Trump made some months ago, that a working minerals deal will mean the U.S. is more invested in Ukraine's security, is wrong. Economic interests, of course, are significant, but we've heard over and over again, the closer integrated economies are, the less likely there is to be a war. There's a famous book in the United Kingdom written 4 years before World War I broke out, saying Europe was so economically integrated you could never have a war. Well, so much for that idea. There's a lot between the stated intention to exploit mineral resources and actually getting them out of the ground. We'll see what actually comes of this.
Right. So Ambassador, in your view, putting it very crudely, President Zelensky of Ukraine is deluding himself when he imagines there will be any measure of security that comes along with America's investment in a big part of Ukrainian minerals. And the same from Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator, who has made exactly the same argument. You think that's just it's misguided at best?
I don't think it will amount to much, at least during the Trump administration. And as I say, these are long-term projects. When you build a mine, you're investing for the long term, and so the benefits from this deal are far off in the future.
Yeah. Look, meanwhile, President Zelensky of Ukraine, he tells us all that he has been talking to American officials about targeting sanctions against Russia. Do you believe that? President Trump has been so reluctant to take any such action. There's been an occasional burst of rhetoric on Air Force One, for example, saying that might be in his mind, but literally no action. How much faith do you have in that?
Well, not much that Trump will do anything further to harm Russia, run, after all, by his good friend, Vladimir Putin. I think that U.S. sanctions enforcement generally is not as effective as it should be. I think this is a long-running problem. I don't think the imposition, the monitoring, the enforcement of sanctions as a whole are done very well. So I don't doubt that there's additional economic pressure the U.S. and Europe, for that matter, could put on Putin, but I don't see Trump initiating it.
Yeah, or even taking part in it, because that would be a powerful instrument of pressure were he to deploy it, but there has been no such sign.
Well, it's a very uncertain time. Trump has indicated he may walk away from the ceasefire negotiations if something doesn't happen. What we don't know is whether he will walk away further from Ukraine and once again suspend the delivery of military assistance, intelligence, and other aid, which would be very, very damaging, obviously, to Ukraine.
Okay, I want to move our focus for a moment. We're going to cover a lot of ground in a very limited space of time, but that's what we end up doing on every occasion. The president tells us again and again that he wants no more foreign wars. He wants no more foreign military entanglements for America. He's looking for a deal with Iran on Iran's nuclear development. I know, Ambassador, you have wanted action against Iran for quite some time, and you've wanted that really quite strongly. The president looking for some sort of verifiable nuclear agreement, that would be worth having, wouldn't it, for the sake of avoiding a war and for the avoidance of Iran developing itself into a nuclear-armed power?
Well, it'd be a very good idea if you could get it. The Iranians have repeatedly insisted on terms that make that impossible, including the 2015 deal, which is itself inherently flawed, and besides which they've been violating it and conducting activities that obviously have consistently put them closer to a nuclear weapon. I think this is a question of the regime itself. It has shown no evidence whatever of making a strategic decision to give up its decades-long pursuit of nuclear weapons. And until you have that, what we saw with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in late 2003 and early 2004, when he did make it very clear, because of the example of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, that he was giving up Libya's pursuit of nuclear weapons. Until you get that, really, these discussions work on the side of the proliferator. In Iran's case right now, they desperately need time to protect themselves. They've been pummeled by Israel, destroying their ballistic missile production program. Their terrorist surrogates, Hamas and Hezbollah, have been decimated. The Assad regime in Syria has fallen. It is to Iran's benefit at this point to talk and talk and talk and talk. And I think that's what they're trying to get Trump into.
Yeah. For you, then, bombing, put it again very, very simply, bombing is the only answer.
Well, there are two answers. The real answer, the real long-term answer, is regime change in Tehran. Until this regime of medieval religious fanatics supported by an ardent military is removed, Iran will remain the principal threat to peace and security in the Middle East. I think destroying their nuclear program could cause further dissatisfaction inside the country, where there's already enormous finger-pointing and recriminations over the losses they've suffered since the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 23rd, 2023. Destruction of the nuclear program, I think, could make that even worse. I think the regime is internally unstable and vulnerable, and I'd like nothing better for the world as a whole, but for the people of Iran in particular, to get a different government.
Right. I can only hope that our listeners will forgive me if they're feeling dizzy at the pace at which I'm dragging their attention around the world. But I want to bring it back to America now, and talk about the Department of Defense and the new Secretary for Defense, Pete Hegseth. Now, we saw last night he gave interviews in which the president stood by Pete Heska, the rather embattled Secretary for Defense in the Trump administration. That's despite two scandals of classified military material being shared on a social media app. Now, again, I know, Ambassador, you're no great supporter of Pete Heska, but can it be said perfectly objectively that the president's loyalty to his personal appointee, the defense secretary, is causing material harm to the security of the United States?
Well, I don't think Hegseth is up to the job. I think that was clear even before he was confirmed. I think the various mistakes he's made have only underlined that. And we're at a very serious point where there's going to be a significant increase made by the president in our defense budget. Congress is going to take some persuading to do that because it also implies cuts in domestic spending, so we have a smaller budget deficit. He needs an effective Secretary of Defense who has the confidence of the uniformed military and the civilian personnel in the Defense Department. And somebody who's casual with American secrets is somebody I think causes real concern inside the department.
That's a concern and not your choice. In a nutshell, though, can you identify material harm?
Well, I think allies around the world, not just because of Hegseth, because of Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, and others, are very worried about security of information they may convey to the United States as part of, the Five Eyes relationship with the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand is one example. But I think it's also a question of discipline within the ranks. If people who are subjected to considerable potential penalties, including imprisonment, if they don't follow the security regulations, see their boss at the very top get away scot-free, I do think that has a material effect, negative effect on morale. I'm
going to ask you finally, really very briefly, so forgive me, but the question I'm putting to our listeners now, I mean, imagine you're there in the Oval Office, the president's willing to listen to you. I doubt he would be very willing to listen to you. But
I wouldn't bank on it.
You've got 5 seconds of the president's time. In a word, what's your advice?
I'd say rescind all of the tariffs you've announced, all the tariffs you've intended to announce. Just give it up, go back. There are other ways to deal with problems like China.
All right. Ambassador John Bolton, pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me
On the program.